Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the W podcast. It's episode 12, and this time we have a returning guest. We have LBNinja again. So let me just start by asking, how are you doing? How have you
I'm
been?
doing pretty good. I've been jamming the PTR, streaming a lot more. I'm having a good time, having a bad time in some dungeons, but I'm excited to talk about that today.
Yeah, so as you guessed, that's probably going to be our main topic today. We're going to be talking about what's coming up in Season 2. We're going to be talking about the PTR currently and the Mythic Plus dungeons that we managed to test there, along with all the changes that Blizzard announced since we're a little bit behind on those. So hopefully we can catch up with everything in this episode. So let's start from there. How was your PTR experience been so far in general?
Oh man, it's you put 20 hours into it and you get about 5 hours of testing into it. I don't know if you've had the same experience, but you'll spend at least us pugs, I'm sure people with groups have a better experience, but you queue up, you wait, and you wait, and you wait, and then you finally get a group, and then someone like dies once, they're embarrassed and they disconnect.
All
It's
right.
it's been pretty frustrating, but I have been able to get some good testing in.
So it's not only me, because I thought maybe I'm just getting the bad groups, man, and maybe because right now on the PTR feels like live servers, because you do a group, you wait forever for somebody to join, and then there's no tanks. Like you always wait for a tank for like 30 minutes, and then although it's PTR and there's like this kind of like acceptance that it's a PTR, we'll be wiping, right? People should not be
Yeah,
leaving. It's also kind of
it's
like life
testing. The
keys,
T
yeah.
stands for testing.
Somebody dies, leaves, and then you're back into queue. So it's not a very good experience from that regard. But let's talk about why that is and what could be the reasons. Because in the very beginning, everything was, at least in my humble opinion, was very overtuned. The dungeons were very hard, so bugs just couldn't kill trash or couldn't kill bosses. And even the ones that stayed, like if you wipe 10 times on a boss, then people just leave because they're wasting their time. Eventually, I think Blizzard reduced, like, they made a lot of changes. They reduced tank busters, they changed abilities, they shuffled things around. But even the last couple of weeks, everything still felt very, very hard and overtuned to me. So, do you think that's the reason why that process hasn't been that enjoyable?
Yeah, I mean, for a reason or a little bit, yeah. There are some mechanics that they've taken and honestly made them like a lot more doable. Like week one of the PTR, there were some packs and some bosses that you would just kind of like everyone would know you'd get hard stuck on if you're not like an organized group, and you'd kind of just say, okay, let's give it like 3 shots and let's dip. But and I think people have kept that mentality even though some of those packs have been fixed. I guess I guess a good example is like in Rookery, everyone would kind of just see the downstairs as like, let's see how much we can do, then we can kind of leave. That was the vibe like the first few weeks, but they've really made it a lot better. Like the guys that jump out, they don't leave a puddle when they jump to you anymore. Like that is, as a Mistweaver player, that's like big deal because I can actually play the game and not have to run around the whole time. I can just sit there and heal. But like they fixed a lot of those things. I just don't think a lot of people have stuck around to see that, and then to load up the PTR after a week and then just kind of see, okay, I died again here, but it's probably because you're a bad player, and then just like leave the group. But yeah,
Yeah, but at least, sorry, my experience was that, okay, I accept I'm a bad player. I'm not gonna argue there. And I'm bugging on the PTR, which is probably not the best game experience that you can get. But my take on this is if it's hard for people who are like mediocre players and they're bugging on the PTR, I don't see how this is actually going to be different when the servers goes live and you have to struggle with those keys. And one
yeah,
other thing that I would like to pick your brains on is something that I completely do not understand on the PTR. And once you go into a key, your gear is scaled. So it doesn't matter if you buy the newest gear from the vendor or you're using, like, your old tier set is not going to work, but the item level is going to scale. And that number is different depending on what level dungeon you're doing. So apparently, if you do a plus 12, it's the best possible highest item level, which, by the way, doesn't make it feel any easier. But if you go to a plus 2, you would expect, okay, whatever that scaling is, now everything should be very easy. But I went to a plus 2 the other day and we got smacked by the second boss in Motherlode. So this is like bugging me a lot because from my perspective, and I don't know if I'm speaking for everyone, but we have no idea what these numbers mean. Like, we don't know if that scaling is supposed to make the dungeon easier, harder, or this is what they're expecting to be the difficulty once it goes live. And this is bugging me a lot because now something happens, we wipe, and I'm like, did we play bad? Was it the scaling? Maybe our gear is too low, or maybe the dungeon is overtuned, and you have no idea what's going on. You have no clue what those numbers mean. So maybe that's also something that kind of hinders the testing process.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of weird to think about. Like, you should be able to take different item levels into keys to test. But I have thought about this, and I do think it's a like an annoyance protection because take someone like me, I like to do dumb things in keys. So I would want to load into like a 10 with like a lower item level to see if it's doable. Obviously, it would not be, but I would learn that hard way, and then so would everyone else in my group, and they wouldn't sign like they didn't sign up for that. So I think it's like auto scaling to
Mhm.
prevent people from just like one person coming into a +2 with like max gear and just steamrolling, you know. But then again, yeah, I was doing I kind of sat around like sixes. I felt that was like a sweet spot because like it was hard. Like sixes are hard, just as hard as tens because I was finding like I could time a 10 and then I would do the same dungeon. It's like we could not beat a boss on a six. And it was very weird, but I do think there's a purpose. It's just you're right. That is kind of weird. Like you would want to test those things, you know?
Yeah,
But
and you say there's a
Yeah,
purpose, but we would like to know what is the purpose. What is
yeah.
the goal?
yeah, I think logically it's kind of what LB pointed to, which would be, look, we want to have as standard as much information from a mathematical standpoint to understand scaling, right? So if you have people that are, let's say, super high item level tank, high item level healer, low item level DPS, because look, people aren't going to be farming gear on PTR, right? It's a very limited time frame. They want to get the best case scenario for data per level, right? So if they automatically scale each dungeon per level, they can use that information as data. Now that just doesn't really take into the consideration the skill level of the players, but at least they can look at damage coming in, raw healing going out, even if the person's not optimizing healing rotation or defensive rotation. They could the numbers are still there, and they can do the math and use that as a baseline for their moving, scaling up or down, not even scaling, but just adjusting, what the output is for the different levels.
That is a
That's
good point. Because they wanna if you're looking at each dungeon compared to each other and how, like, balanced they are, you do wanna have, like, a controlled element to base your information off of. So if you look at, like, 10 Priory runs and 10 Darkflame runs, and, like, everyone failed the Darkflame, but the average item level was lower, you don't really get as much information from that, you know what I mean? So I guess that's
yeah,
a great point.
baseline.
Yeah.
I see that point, but what is bugging me is that in the past I've been on the PTR like in almost every patch release so far, and I vividly remember that whenever Freehold was on the PTR, one of the Dragonflight dungeons, we went there. It was a +20 then, which is the equivalent of +10 now. We smoked that, like we timed it. We had like we almost rechested it, etc. So I know it's tuning, right? I don't know how the scaling worked back then. I know there was scaling. But the point is, we went through, okay, maybe it was a little bit way too easy, but we saw the whole dungeon, we tested our classes, we saw all the bosses, we saw all the mechanics, and right now the tuning on the PTR is such that, as LB actually said, once you go to the Rookery on the first few weeks, maybe you would kill the first boss, like that's a big maybe, but then you're not getting to the second boss. What's left for the dungeon that's after that? So my point was, okay, it's too hard, maybe that's intended, but then they're not getting data from us, for the end of the dungeons because, okay, we're bad players, whatever, but we cannot reach it. We cannot get there. And then I opened the stream as like some of the big players there, and okay, I see them on the last boss in Rookery, so they managed to get there, but they're not timing this. Like I can see their timers; they're like
Yeah, it's like plus
45
20
minutes in.
minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so like my problem is first they're not getting data from us, let's call it like the normal players, right? And then the only players that get to the end of the dungeons are basically, let's call them sweats, borrowing some terms from classic and stuff, right? So the only people that get there are those sweats, and they're gonna tune everything according to what they do there, which is definitely something that we won't be able to do there once we get it, right? We're gonna play worse. So this is kind of like my biggest concern here, because I don't think the way that they set up everything, I don't think they're getting enough data, because okay, the numbers and the scaling should help them mathematically to make everything better eventually, but they're only getting a little bit of data from people that I don't think they should be tuning the dungeons to. Not to mention that this week, if you wanted to queue into Motherlode, and there's like LFG2, exactly as on live servers on the PTR, the Motherlode keys would not show up on the LFG, right? So you can, like, if you open it, you will see no Motherlode keys. So you would either need to like spam chat, somebody want to do Motherlode, which never ends well, until I
Yeah.
figure out you can list it as like a heroic or something, and
Theater of
then
Pain.
people,
Oh yeah.
people
I would
started
list
to.
mine as Theater of Pain. Just change the title. We're actually doing Motherlode.
Yeah, so you had to do things like that, right? And then last week, I wanted to test Priory. And the way that everything works on the PTR is you have your keystone, and there's scrolls that you can buy from a vendor. You can set
They were
the level.
so annoying.
Yeah, you can set the level to whatever you want, and then there's different scrolls that set the keystone to whatever dungeon you want. So those scrolls say this scroll is going to set the dungeon to Theater of Pain or to Darkflame Cleft. So I'm like, okay, nobody's listing Priory keys. Maybe I'll do one. So I buy the scroll, I click the scroll teleports me to the Priory, but it doesn't set the keystone. So now I don't know how you test it. Maybe you run other dungeons and you time them and you hope that your key turns into Priory. Like, and this is another, like, this kind of goes back to the point I have. Those things are there. They're supposed to be tested, but they're not tested either because there's a bug or they made it too hard or something is not showing in LFG. And this is like annoying me beyond, like I cannot
Yeah.
explain it, because now we're going to get those dungeons in live. They're going to be overtuned, and they'll be like, yeah, you didn't give us feedback. We couldn't, you know? They were just not there available for us. So yeah, I'm kind of scared about those things, because I see that something might be way too easy on the PTR, but I would rather have this, because then they'll have data for the whole dungeon, and then they can tune things up on live instead of doing what they're doing right now, and then they have no data on the last boss in Rookery, and then how are you going to tune that once it goes live?
Yeah. I don't know. I think one of the reasons why I haven't seen as much testing like in lower pug keys is because of the levers. Like that is the number one thing. You'll just be fighting, and then like randomly one person will like disconnect, and you're like, well, did they DC because it's PTR, or did they DC because they're mad? You know, like, and it was so annoying because, like you said, a lot of things are overtuned, and they would just like kill you, one shot you, you're dead, and then you get mad, you log on to your next character to test and do the same thing. So I don't know. I really hope that they do something about that in the future for PTR. Like if you leave a dungeon preemptively, you're like banned from the PTR for like 15 minutes, you know, like something like that. Because that could help testing a lot. Yeah, it would probably limit the amount of players
Yeah.
online at a time, but it's like you're getting a better quality, a density of good players, you know.
That's probably harsh, not to mention that on the first week, I would get disconnected like every 5 minutes or something. And I think it was connected to
Banned.
something like me jumping in Ghost Roof or something, but every time I did it, bam, you're
Oh
disconnected.
wow.
Yeah, if you jump while running down the stairs of Theater of Pain, you're gone. You're
Yep.
dead.
Yeah.
Like out of
You're
here.
kidding.
Yeah.
Oh
It's crazy.
no.
Yeah, and I think even one of them, like I disconnected, and I don't know what happened, but I it just wouldn't let me back in, you know. So I had to wait for a few minutes until I actually managed to log back in. So yeah, I mean, I guess those things are supposed to happen on the PTR, but it just seems like there's way too many of them happening right now. And yes, people tell me, yeah, don't worry, it's PTR. They're gonna fix it once it goes live. But those bugs that we see with the Motherlode, with the Priory that we just explained, I'm not convinced, man. I'm not an optimist, because what, like, if you cannot get everything done properly on the PTR, what makes you think that they're gonna do it right on the live servers, you know? And specifically those bugs that I just explained, they're basically preventing people from testing the dungeons. And this is something that I would think, okay, if that's a problem, they're gonna go and fix it right away so we can actually get data. That hasn't happened. So for me, that seems like a big problem, and I hope I'm wrong. But as I said, I'm not an optimist.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll add one more thing from a little bit more from a healer perspective, but playing all those dungeons, actually didn't feel good for a healer. Maybe because I'm not playing Mistweaver. We're gonna talk about that in a different episode. Mistweaver is popping out right now, but they're also melee, and they can just press their buttons and heal. While the shaman that I play is a caster, and boy, it feels like there's constantly something that you need to be dodging and you're moving. So there's like swirlies, hammers, balls coming at you, frontals, all kinds of mechanics. And if I get like 10 seconds when I just can stand and heal, I'm like, what is going on? Why is nothing there to dodge? I'm like, what is
Yeah,
going on? So
something's up. I'm
yes,
about to die.
I'm probably
Yeah.
disconnecting or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that definitely, I get it. They want to make it hard. They want to make it engaging for, I guess, DPS and maybe tanks. But I'm a freaking caster, man, and if I stop healing, then people start dying. So maybe that's just me complaining. Hopefully it's that, but it felt like almost every dungeon is like a swirly hell with all kinds of, like, everything looks different. It's like a different color, or maybe it's like a bow instead of swirly on the ground, but it feels like you have to be moving all the freaking time. So that definitely didn't feel well. What was it the same for you?
Yeah, I mean, well, as a melee character, it's equally as bad. I will say it was worse those first few weeks, but they've removed a lot of like the pain point swirlies for
Yeah.
melee. But it has been a problem lately. Like, instead of challenging us healers, like how can you deal with this damage? It's how can you deal with this damage while on the move? And I think those mechanics are great. Like, you have the bosses in like City of Threads from last season, for example. Fine, that's a great test for us healers. But it does feel like it's like almost every pack now. You have to like cancel your cast to move over here, and it's like at that
Yeah.
point you might as well just like play like Disc Priest. You kind of get the best of both worlds. You're a caster, but your cast is Smite. Like, you just take a sidestep and then cast Smite again. Like it's not as punishing. But yeah, like Resto Sham, you need to cast a healing wave. No,
Yeah.
no, no, no. There's a swirly under you. Like, good luck. So
Yeah.
it's very frustrating. But you know what they could do? They could give every class Spirit Walker's Grace, and then give Shaman permanent Spirit Walker's Grace, and then we're all
Yeah.
happy.
I
You
was
know,
thinking about that, but it's like a minute and a half cooldown, man. Like I need it
Make
all
it
the
permanent.
time.
Make
Yeah.
it permanent. Why not?
just roll Resto Druid, guys. No problem.
I
Easy,
mean,
easy,
big
easy
facts.
game.
We're
Yeah.
spitting over here.
Actually, I haven't played the rest of Druid. I'll say that much. But from what I'm hearing, it's not as bad. Like they've
Oh
gotten
yeah,
into a better place, but I still need to try it. So
it's a good time now. It's a lot less
yeah,
punishing
yeah,
than it was early PTR.
exactly.
When
Okay,
I haven't played much PTR, but we know the culture of WoW, and we've never seen a dungeon like tuning where they were like, this dungeon's too easy, we're gonna make it harder, right? It's never that, right? It's always, we're gonna make getting and acquiring gear extremely
yeah,
difficult the first 2 weeks of the season. We're gonna limit your crests, we're gonna limit your stones, and maybe they're gonna try to move to that, but it's always just this miserable,
yeah,
challenging couple first weeks. And then they start to do this tuning where it's like, okay, yeah, we reduced boss damage, we reduced, Oh, also, by the way, we buffed this healer. I remember Discipline Priest, the first 2 weeks was, and fortunately for me, I was maining Resto Druid, so I wasn't playing a ton of Disc Priest. But when I would, it was painful. And then they buffed Atonement like crazy, right? And then it was
Mhm.
like, oh, Disc is amazing, right? So we can expect the first 2 weeks, the typical Blizzard culture of miserable. We have to cry. We have to
Yeah,
because they won't change it if we don't. Go ahead, LB.
I have a take for you. I think it's pretty lukewarm too, but I think that you would, as a normal player, as much as it sucks, I think it's better for the average person for things to be overtuned on release. Because picture a world where everything drops and it's like pretty easy and you can plow through keys, and then all of a sudden, like, you're doing better, but so is the top end. And if the top end is timing like 25's week 2, then they nerf every, or yeah, they buff everything to make it harder because they're like, oh crap, this is too easy. Then that's like, okay, the highest IO is like 4,000, and all I can get to is like 3,000. Like, you know. So I think it is better for it to be like you're chasing that invisible line instead of that you cross it and then they have to set it. You know what I mean? So,
All right, can I
but it is
interrupt you there?
miserable. Yeah.
I don't think they will ever buff a dungeon after they released it, because this is gonna be like a rebellion, right? Like people who
Mhm.
just uprise and they're
Yeah.
gonna just quit the game. Like, and LB actually gave a pretty good example. Like, what about the people who actually were ahead of the curve and ahead of the
Yeah.
pack? You know,
Yep.
so I don't
Yep.
think that's ever going to happen. But like, first, nobody ever complained that something is way too easy. Like, if the highest IO is 4,000, like, I don't think anyone cares, right? We'll be playing at whatever level we are. They'll be playing at 4,000, but it is what it is. As we talked before, I think the natural difficulty of Mythic Plus comes with the keystone levels, right? So it is going to get very hard at some point. The question is, how is it for people who are like at the lower end of the M plus, they're starting, or you're playing ults, you know, how easy it is to get into that. And I'll also add something else on that topic. Maybe I've told that story before, but releasing things that are overtuned and nerfing them later, especially if it's not immediate, I think that has a very negative effect. And I had like a guildie from my old guild. He would primarily raid with us. He was a healer, and then after the raid, we would like drag him into keys so he can like get gear from there, etc. And it was the beginning of Dragonflight, and we're like, okay, come do dungeons with us. And he was like, I'll come and heal any dungeon for you except Ruby Life Pools. I'm never stepping my foot again there, because
Was I your guilty? Because that's me. That's
no,
what I
he
was.
was a druid. But yeah, and he went and did that dungeon into the very beginning when it was overtuned. He saw how it is, and he was like, I'm never. And he actually, I've never seen him in Ruby. Maybe he did it, like I don't know, but I've never seen him in that dungeon ever again. And yes, they eventually nerfed the dungeon. They made it a little bit more playable and things like that, but they basically made him give up, right?
Mhm.
I also remember the Neltarian Lair once that was released. I went with my guildies there, and on the worm boss that do the poison spitting, right?
Mhm.
This thing, in the very first week, they nerfed it very quickly, right? But in the very first week, that was so overtuned that we were doing it was a plus 14, which is like the equivalent of plus 4 right now. So it's not a very high
Mhm.
key. I did more healing in that boss for 5 people that I did previously in a raid boss in the raid where I'm healing 20 other people, and we still wiped, right? It was still
Yeah.
not enough. So I think if things happen like that, it's just turning off people. Yeah, we are there. We're gonna stay. We're gonna play until the end of the season. But I think it's turning off a lot of people, and that's why I think that shouldn't happen, because it has mostly negative effects. And if you are doing the PTR like this right now, we're gonna end up with the last boss in Rookery very hard because nobody played it, and then people will be like, "I'm never going to the Rookery again," and then maybe they'll fix it. They will fix it, but it's gonna be too late. Is my point. What I'm trying to say right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the
I
same
mean,
thing with Kari. You guys remember Karzan the first week? We talked about that before. It's like there's always the first week is always just brutal. And I think LB hit a point, like they can't they can't move the barrier, the line on where difficulty is up because it's an unfair advantage. We already
Yeah.
talked about this. So they have to kind of do the safest way. I think for me, my recommendation would be, regular, frequent, small changes. We've talked about that too. It's just, look, you don't have to wait 3 weeks to get the data to see that everybody's crying because they can't. I mean, look, the data's there. They have it. It's like people are failing at this point. What's the problem? What's the issue? What do we need to, where do we need to move it? And just make small changes.
Yeah, and they can also see that the data is not there for the last boss in Rookery, for example.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah, exactly.
that could tell
Yeah,
them
yeah.
a lot. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I will say, like, I always say PTR is like fake numbers, like fake hard, you know, because every time I test PTR in beta, they do have like one dungeon that's like the standout tough dungeon, and then it makes it live, and that one's like almost always the easiest one. So I do think that it's easy to doom about how bad like the PTR experience is, but I I don't know, maybe it's because 'cause I'm a Mistweaver player, but dude, I have so much faith in the devs right now. Like, they've been cooking lately. But, I do think that by the time the game like, this season hits live, I do expect it to be kind of balanced, but like you said, there probably will be some pain points. Like final bosses is just a great example where the only data they're gathering is from like those plus 14s that like big groups are pushing. Like they're not really gathering any much or any from like smaller keys and stuff. But I'm sure there will be pain points and stuff, but I don't think it's going to be as bad as it is currently on PTR. Like they have some changes that they're stockpiling, getting ready to dump on us when it hits live. I would expect, I would hope, but I do expect, you know.
Yeah, I really hope you're right. And I'll just add one more thing. I've been posting on the forums in the previous iterations as well, because I think that's a good way to provide some feedback.
Mhm.
And last season, I remember that there was like the Mythic Plus post, and I went there, I did my post, and I saw a lot of other people posting, like Tion and, you know, all kinds of posts. There's also the people who are just crying there, the game is too hard and it's not fair, you know, without actually providing constructive feedback. But there was like tens and hundreds of posts. This time, the forums, I don't know, maybe I'm just not looking into the correct place, but it seems like the forums are relatively empty compared to what it was before. Especially like the last week, I went and posted, and there were like few people that were just crying there without any constructive feedback. And I didn't see, maybe there was just like one other post that was like trying to provide some feedback. And that kind of felt like, compared to previous seasons, that felt kind of dead. Kind of like
Hmm.
what the PTR feels like right now. So I'm just afraid that they're not getting enough data. And, you know, we talked about the reasons, but this is where we had it. And I really hope that they can nail the tuning on release. But, you know, as I said, I'm not an optimist like LB right now. Call me a pessimist if you want. Okay. So let's switch gears then. PTR is PTR. Like, don't take anything we said for granted, because obviously once it releases, all those scaling numbers and all those tests are going to contribute to a better tuning. But there are some things that are set in stone and some changes that they announced. And we can, I guess, start with the very first one, which I think is going to be the biggest impact of all, at least for some of the players. They did announce previously that there's going to be no depletion below for keys below 12, but then they upped it a little bit and they said, okay, now we're gonna actually move this further. So now if you time all keys at the plus 12, then they don't deplete below 12. But then they added another achievement. If you do it at the 13, they're not gonna deplete below 13, and so forth and so forth. Now, the achievements actually go to like plus 25, so I guess they're not expecting everyone to time all 25s next season. But I would like to hear what is your opinion on this change, and how do you think it's actually going to change the Mythic Plus experience in general?
So when they first announced this and you saw like Mythic Plus is saved, like, oh, everyone rejoice. Like that was the you know, the take on it. I was like, okay, I mean this is like a cool change. Okay, it's only gonna affect like the people that push like mega keys and stuff. They don't have to redo their 17 to get another 18.
Yeah.
But ever since then, I've kind of like put myself in the shoes of like, what if this change was in effect right now? How would my day be affected? And just as soon as I started thinking like that, the first thing I did was, okay, I need to get some like 14s done, but I have this 13 City of Threads key. I need to do this. It would give me some IO. Let's do this, push the 14, and then hopefully go from there. Immediately, I load in, do a City of Threads. Someone disconnects on the first few packs, and I'm like, wait, that sucks. And then my key's a 12 now, and I'm like, well, I don't want to do a 12 City of Threads because it's City of Threads and it's a 12. I wouldn't get anything from it, so I'd just be putting myself through that. But so that sucked. And then eventually, like a few days later, I was like, okay, I have to do this because I want to do a 13. I want to do my key. So I do this 12 City of Threads and it bricks. I'm like, dude, now I have an 11 City of Threads. So I was just like, man, this affects like so many people. Yeah, you do have to cross that threshold of getting 12s and stuff, but it's kind of like once you cross this massive barrier, which is like around the 3K item level, you can like take a sigh of relief, like I've done it, like I've done the grind, now I just need to do the progression. And yeah, those kind of are the same thing, but you can really like pick and choose what key you do. Like you just have way more control now. And I personally, I was low on this change until I thought about like all of the, you know, aspects of it, and I think it's like a huge change for Mythic Plus. 100%.
Yeah. What
What
about
do you
you,
think?
Jay?
I have a hot take. I don't know if you guys are gonna like it or not, but you know,
Shoot it.
I'm in technology, and I'm an older guy, right? I've been doing it for a long time, and when I started my career, and just hang with me for a minute here. When I started my career, I could get a job, 15 jobs in a week if I wanted to, because I was kind of at the bottom of my career, right? So there was, it was learning and stuff. But as I got higher into the ranks in IT and got very specialized, um, the job market starts to tighten as far as available jobs, right? And so here's where I'm going to translate this to. Once you get that achievement at 12, right? You're kind of separated from the other people that haven't gotten those 12s yet. And yeah, they can queue into your 12s, but you're kind of like in a limited group. But then the same thing's going to happen at 13, where there's going to be a very thick separation of like, why would you ever go do a 12, right? If you get the 13 achievement, why would you go do 12s? If you get the 14 achievement, why would you go down to 13? Right.
Let
So
me
I
take your
I can see there being like this caste system, for lack of a better term, of like the under 12 group, the 12 group, the 13 group, the 14 group, and the player pools within those groups are going to be kind of limited, honestly, I think. So that's a hot take. I like the change. I think it's cool, especially when if you have a team and you want to, give your tank multiple opportunities to identify certain pools, your healer the opportunity to really min max, cooldown usage. And, I don't know if you guys use Vasiro's dungeon spreadsheet, but he has a dungeon one, which is really cool. That's going to really help with kind of min maxing your cooldown usage there. So I love the idea, but I'm curious how that's going to actually play out when it comes to player pool in those specific verticals.
Well, let me take your analogy as literally the loudest leaf blower in the world is right next to my window. I'm so sorry. But let me take your analogy and like run off of it. So you're progressed in your career, right? You've like developed your own abilities and stuff. Well, what if they started giving you like day one tasks, you know? Imagine being a plus 13 player and being like, well, crap, now I got this 10 out of the vault and I have to push it up 4 times before I can actually do the work at my level. So it's like there are people that do 13s. They just sit there and they queue up for 13s. They don't ever go down and do a 10. Yeah, as someone who pushes a 10, it would be nice to have that like 13 enhancement shaman
Sure.
like in my key like
Yeah.
pumping. But it is like it's such a chore for people who have reached that milestone to try to get back up there. It's just like you have to reprog your key every week, and it's like it is very frustrating. But I mean, your analogy, I get it from that standpoint, but from their standpoint, it's like they have to come back down and do like these like menial things, and then get their way back up.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's going to change, right? In the new season, they're not going to ever have to do that. The vault will always stay at 13 and they won't ever have to go down. So now that player potentially, unless he's helping out friends or just being generous with his ability, is never going to queue into 10s or 11s or even 12s. There would be no point, right? He's going to want to, I mean, the cool thing is there's incentive to push for every single player to like, oh, I have, or like before you didn't. And the way they originally announced this change was like, oh, it just doesn't get depleted under 12. So that doesn't really incentivize you to push past unless you're trying to get a certain achievement. Now there's like major incentive to push, and get the next look, because now I want to do 14s. And okay, cool. I got all my 14, or I got one more 14. I just got to get it. And I'm going to be queuing with other people that just need that 14 as well. And then when you get it, it's cool. So there's that part of it's cool. But I really think, like, to your point, like, the vault, when they get the vault, it's going to be whatever their highest achievement is. If their highest achievement's 13, they're going to get a 13. They're never going to have to go do a 12. They're never going to have to go do an 11. So the players at 14 and 15 are never going to have to do that homework. So I think that's cool. But I think it's going to limit the player pool, especially, you're always going to be starting at 12 and 13. You're always going to be uh, queuing, and I guess this doesn't change, but you're always going to be queuing with people at the top end of their kind of ceiling, right? Where they're trying to learn. Now, the system really helps that, but you're always going to be dealing. You're not really, unless you have somebody on your team, you're not going to be dealing with Giga Chads just queuing into your 12. It's not going to happen. I don't think. Maybe that's pessimistic, but
Yeah, I mean, you'll still have to do like vault keys and stuff. Like, if I want to do my 8th key of a week or in a week, and I'm like, it's like Monday night. Let me just slam like a +10. You would still do that, you know, like it would still happen, but yeah, it'll be a lot lesser. But I don't know. I think that's also a good thing because it's good to have like-minded people in a key. Like if I'm pushing from 2800 to like 2900 and I get with like a 3200 tank, then
Yeah,
they're like, I don't know if you guys experience this, maybe it's
I
just
do.
like me, but every time that like a DPS makes a mistake, they have to type like dot dot dot, you know, like I'm better than you and you suck. Like
Yeah,
we don't need
yeah.
that, you know, we don't need that
Or a mega
interaction.
pull, right? They do this
Yeah,
omega pull
exactly. Like I
that's
do
not
this in
pug
my
friendly.
+14. It's like, okay,
Yeah,
cool. I'm on an alt, this is a 9. Like what
yeah,
are we
yeah,
doing, you know?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I think it will obviously like with any change there's going to be like some friction, but for me I think this is in the long run, it's going to only be positive. I think it's just going to make you enjoy your time on the game. Like if you get off from work, you have like 3 hours to play before you go to bed. Then, you know, you do like one key, you brick it. That's okay. You try again. You know, like you don't have to like, well, now I have to do the 9, but now I'm not going to get that vault. It's the reason why I'm doing this. You know, so I think it's going to be a net positive.
Yeah. Go ahead, Wolvie.
Yeah, I want to add some things here. So I like your takes. We might be stuck with a very low theater of pain that we cannot time on a 13. I like the LB's take there. Hopefully they tune that so that there's no problems like that. But I think the biggest thing that we can say about this change, good or bad, this is actually going to change the way that Mythic Plus works on a +12s and above. And that stands true for both pre-made groups and for pugging. Because if you're pugging and you know that your key cannot drop, right? You can just actually let me start from there. So this is going to turn keys above 12 basically as a tournament room keys. Now on the tournament room you make your key, and if you break it, if you fail and you go out, it doesn't deplete, right? So what happens on tournament rooms, for those of you who play there, is you go in, you try this crazy first pull. If it works, and then you continue with the dungeon. If it fails, you just zone out. You've wasted like 2 minutes, and then you try again, right? So this completely changes the way that you basically think about the dungeon and you approach the dungeon, because you're not scared, you know? If it fails, I don't have to go and do it on a lower key level, right? So this is going to affect bugs because that you be, I hope actually, but you be more lenient into picking players into your group, because right now you can get stuck. Oh, I need that enhancement shaman because I know that they're pumping, or I need the meta tank because I don't want to play with the DH, right? Now you know that your key is not gonna brick, so you can actually open up to, hey, I'll take this guy. If it works, it works. If not, we can just try again, right? So hopefully that is going to make bugs, maybe manageable is not the correct word, but it's gonna make people maybe a little bit more acceptive of inviting other people and playing with other people and trying off meta comps and all of those things. So I think that's gonna be positive from people who are just bugging. But then at the same time, pre-made groups, because I actually started playing with guildies at the end of the season, kind of sort of like a team, right? And I think this is also going to change the way that they play, because right now, you know that you want this specific. So let's say we're fishing for this 14 Dawnbreaker or 15 Dawnbreaker, right? We have to do those 13s and we hope that we hit that 14, but instead of the Dawnbreaker, we hit City of Threats, and we're like, okay, we're not doing that, you know? So now you have the key, you know, you can farm it up. So you're gonna prog it, you know, and if you fail it, you go out, it's the same key. You don't have to fish for it again. You don't have to run other keys. So you can basically lock in into that key and progress that key pretty much like a raid boss, right? You'll be going in on and on and on again until you make that pool work, until you learn that boss, and then you eventually gonna time it, and you're just gonna go to another key on that same level until you get all of them done, and then you're gonna move up into a level, right? But I think this process is going to be significantly faster than what people are doing right now. Because right now you play a little bit safer, but you failed the key, then you go and do 3 other keys until you can get to the same key. So that is like, let's say 2 hours of time, you know, just farming the key. And then you fail again, right? So now in that 2 hours, you'll probably be able to prog and finish that key instead of just fishing for it in order to fail. So I think that this is going to speed up that process for the pre-made teams significantly, and maybe that's going to make their season end much sooner. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing because I haven't played into that high level where you say, okay, I'm done with the season. I know I'm in title range or whatever. We're just taking time off. Maybe people enjoy that because I haven't seen some of the biggest players to say, ooh, I'll be pushing keys from the first day of the season until it actually ends, right? At some point, they all quit. They go play different games. They go play hardcore. It doesn't matter, right? They all quit. So now maybe it's better for them because they're going to be devoting a little bit less time to the game, which is probably something that they're going to welcome. Their season is going to be over sooner, but then at the same time, it might be better for PUGs, which are going to be left struggling there with the other PUGs trying to get to like the 14s or the 15s for the rest of the season. So I think the takeaway is it's going to be a completely different gameplay style. I hope it's better, but maybe only time will tell.
Yeah, I mean, I think like for organized groups, undeniably they're happy. Like it's just pure good for them. But one thing that they didn't announce because it doesn't have to do with WoW, it has to do with Raider IO. But I think this change has a potential to have like a corrosive impact because of something that Raider IO is doing. I don't know if you've seen it, but they have a new metric that you can track per player coming, or I think it's starting next season. It's like the percentage of the keys that you complete that were timed. So if you complete 100 keys, but you only timed like 74 of them, you have a 74% metric there. So what that does is one, it incentivizes you to, time your keys, right? Yeah, but it also incentivizes you to leave your key if you're not going to time, which is already a thing that people do, and it makes the game very frustrating. So if you can do that with now zero negative effects, now you don't break your key. If you're doing your plus 15 and your shaman forgets to kick, you kick him. You kick him, you go again, and there's no penalty at all. So it can have it can bring out the toxic side of different pug players, but hopefully like Blizzard, we've been asking for something like, hey, give us like a point system for every key you leave, and then you have like a deserter score, and like, oh, this guy has a 300 deserter score, I am not inviting him. We've been asking for something like that, and I feel like this is kind of like in the Raider IO metric is like in the wrong direction, and then this change does kind of make me skeptical, but hopefully they get rid of that metric, or maybe they already have and I'm just like talking about
So
nothing. But
you're saying that if you just leave a key, you break it, but you don't complete it, right? You leave before the timer is up. That's basically not tracked.
I'm pretty sure that's what people look. Hey, I saw it in a Reddit post,
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
they showed the metric and they explained it, and everyone was like, all the comments were kind of like backing it. So, but it's
Yeah, because
it's
I,
Reddit. It
I
could
actually
literally,
worked with the Blizzard API a little bit, and there's data for the runs there, but it only works with completed runs. So there's no data, at least I haven't found any for keys that you actually leave before the timer expires. And thinking about it, I think that's a bad metric because for me personally, probably this metric is going to be like 95% or something if it's just tracking completed keys, because you never actually complete a key if you're not going to time it, right? There are a few keys that maybe you don't time by 30 seconds, so you're like hoping at the very end that you might actually make it and then the timer expires. Yeah. But most of the time, if a key is going bad and you know you're going to break it, people just leave, right? So I think completed keys and time keys, that percentage is going to be like probably 95 for me. But if you add all the keys that was bricked and I left way before the timer, I don't know, it's probably like 50%, but like it's going to be a heaven to earth difference there in those percentages. And I think unfortunately there's no way to track those keys that were just left and abandoned. But maybe Blizzard has a way to do that, and I would be very interested to see that metric because I think those numbers might be a little bit scary.
Yeah, the other thing to think about there is there's people game it up. And so you think about a tank that's frustrated, he could just run circles and not
Yeah.
leave. And just people know we're not making any more progress. So who's going to leave first? I think you'd have to have some kind of voting system to really like, and then you're dealing with, a pug politics there. Like there's just so many variants that make that difficult. There's probably a way to do it. I don't think there's probably not an easy way to implement, but it is a challenging situation, and I wish I personally I think I talked to Wolvy about this. I talked to one of my other developer friends about something similar where you can rate people. I think we had a podcast where we talked about, at the end of the run, who was the champion, who was the all-star. You vote at least for the positive, right? I think that's a good idea. The negative, and that was Wolvy's take on that. It's like let's encourage positivity, not
Yeah,
focus on the negativity.
that's a good point.
I like that. I think that's probably the easiest kind of way to get there, because that does encourage other people to, especially if there's rewards around that, or if there's like some kind of other incentive. Like I think that's the right way. The negative side, it's hard, I think it'd be hard to get that, but maybe one day.
They can at least give it a shot. Like if people don't use it, they don't use it, but at least they tried,
Yeah,
something like
yeah.
that. All right, let's talk about some of the other Mythic Plus changes. So that key no depletion change is definitely interesting and something that we'll be talking about more, I guess, in the weeks to come. But they're actually changing a lot more. So they're changing a little bit the gears and the level of gears that you're getting, what levels you're starting to getting better crests, things like that. But I think one of the biggest takeaways from this point here is that there are not removing the Challenger Sparrow. This is the 15-second death penalty for if you die. They're moving it up to 12s and plus 12s. So right now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it started at +7. So at a +7, if you die, you lose 15 seconds from the timer. Now this is going to be +12. So I think that's one of the biggest changes here, because I said this before, I don't think it's fair to punish people at a +7 to that degree, because +7 is basically still learning ground, right? This is where people actually get into Mythic Plus once they start doing, they stop doing Delphs and start doing M+. And that moving it to a +12 kind of aligns with this new no depletion system, because that also starts as a +12. So I think that's a huge step in the right direction. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of like Blizzard is really drawing a line at a threshold that they want us to get to. I think they gave us there's a new achievement for like 2850 IO.
They moved it to 3K.
They moved it 3K. Okay.
Yep.
Well, so they're like clearly drawing a line of like, hey, just like push to this point, like push here, which I think is good. I think obviously it's probably to raise like their numbers. Like there's a statistic that you can track in games of like how much average time a player spends in the game. So they probably want us to play the game more, but like from a player standpoint, I think it's good to have that goal clearly defined. Like if I can reach this threshold, then I'll get an achievement. I'll start like you can see the game shift. Like the game is like clearly a progression system up until that point. So I think even in like 11s, especially the groups I was in, you would get people still learning mechanics.
Yeah.
So it's good to have like everything before that threshold is like, hey, there you can be at different tiers of understanding and like progress through without getting punished super hard like the in-game players are. So I like that change a lot.
Yeah, it seems like
Yeah.
they're just trying to make everything easier into the lower key levels, because they are making the scaling a little bit smaller. So instead of having a 10% difference between the keys below, I think it's below 10, it's going to be just 7% now. So hopefully those jumps will be smaller. The big gate at a +12 that we had with this big jump of the affix that was present in Season 1 is also going to be gone. So supposedly that's going to make the progression curve a little bit smoother and a little bit easier, especially around that point, because this season jumping from a +11 to a +12 felt like a huge step. It was completely unbearable. And yeah, then moving those 15 seconds up to a +12, I think specifically for people who are just learning, and maybe also for alts that you're playing at lower key levels, is going to be quite welcome.
Yeah,
For
I
sure.
love it. I think the fact that you're no longer dealing with the other fixes at 12 is great. Now you have just a time variance, which is good. And I think, and then you also now have the fact that you can just run and run and run in practice. I think LB hit on a very important thing. Sometimes between the key levels, you're just not, things that wouldn't kill you before now kill you. And it hurts to experience that.
Yeah.
While and that's the whole point of like learning and practice, right? It's like, oh, I didn't know I needed to use a damage reduction ability, a defensive at this point, because it never killed me before in a 10, right? And now in 11, all of a sudden it one shots me. Like, what is that? So yeah, I think that is a really positive change in moving that to 12, so people can still not have to bear that 15-second penalty. But then it gives the people 12 and above, like, hey, you can't just just it's not meaningless. Every death is actually going to count. But now the benefit for them is they could just practice over and over. So I think it's a very positive change for sure.
Yeah.
My big hope is Blizzard don't drop the bag. I think these changes are going to bring a ton of people back. And if they just leave everything for 3 weeks, if they go on vacation for 3 weeks and say, we're going to gather data and see how it goes, and we'll come back in 3 weeks and tune it, I think that's going to be a huge failure. I think they need to be very observant from the beginning, listen to the feedback, filter out the stuff that's just crybabies that don't have constructive criticism and aren't giving real value, and really look for the ones that are, and look at the data and make adjustments, even if they're very small. If people have more confidence, if they see posts that are regular saying we're tuning this, we see this as a problem, we're making a change, we hear you, wrestler druids, you need more help, we hear you, rogues, you or whoever, right? Like, you guys need, you guys are dying too quickly, or whatever. Like, make those adjustments, make them very small, but post it and make them frequently. And I think that'll be huge. And all three of us, I'm sure, are the same. We see the receding player base, whether that's in retail or PTR. Wolvy definitely touched on that, even if it's on the forums. We want to retain these players, right? Because we all want to play. We love this game. So make these changes, and I think that the hypothetical changes are great. I think it's going to bring people back. Let's retain them, please. That's my back into.
And since LB mentioned it, this new achievement, which was now moved to 3K IO, which I think gives just a mount, right? It's that's it, right?
Yeah.
Because the key
Yeah.
depletion is now connected to something else.
Just a mount.
Just hey,
You're gonna get attacked in the comments. Just a mount.
I'm a mount collector, guys. I'm very happy. But hear me
Save
out.
face.
Hear me out. Do you think that this is actually going to make more people reach 3K now? Because there is a goal. Like, I know you, LB, your goal is to get 3K at least every season, right? This is kind of like your starting point, and then you want to see what happens after that. You want to push further, etc., right? So that it has been the same for me. Like, every season, my first goal is get to 3K, and then we'll see how it goes from there. But that was like a personal goal, something that we wanted to do because it was just, I guess, a nice number. It's a round number. But do you think that now that there's something actually connected to it, even if it's just amount, more people are actually going to get into the bandwagon and try to get to that threshold?
I do think so, because not just it is the achievement, but around 3K is like, right now I think that's like all 13s and maybe like no, it's half 12s, half 13s,
All
right?
12s and like 3 13s.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you get an achievement, but you also gain access to a new version of the game, like this new tournament realm. So it's like you are getting a lot more than just a mount, and an achievement. You do also kind of gain access to that. So me as a player, like, I used to push to like 32, 3300 just and get to a stopping point. I'd be like, okay, I'm kind of burnt out. But this season I got to 3K and I have not wanted to I do not want to push further. Like,
Same.
I know I could, I just don't want to. So I just like
Yeah.
I just now started doing like keys again on my main. So I at least I don't know if their goal was to make more people get to 3K, but I do know that their goal is to make people play beyond 3K more, or at least like test their potential and maybe form more teams. Maybe they want to have like more teams formed so they can have like a minor league bracket going. Like maybe they want that aspect of beyond the 12 threshold going.
I'll just add, I have the privilege of playing with one of the best Holy Priests in my raid. And in Mythic Plus, he just gets to 2500 because this is where the last achievement is, right?
Yeah.
And he's clearly like much better player than me. He can go far beyond 3K, but he just doesn't have the incentive, man. All he wants to do is raid, and if there's nothing for him in M Plus, then why bother? So maybe now he's gonna get to at least 3K. And do you guys think that there should be like more steps? Because now it's going to be 25, then it's a huge jump to 3K, and then there's again nothing after 3K. So maybe something small, like smaller steps, and maybe something that goes beyond 3K, or maybe that's too much to ask for.
There is Beyond 3K, which is the really big one, right? The
Oh,
0.1%, right? Yeah. So there's something there, a very small
yeah.
group. I do want to add though, I think in PvP there's not a ton either, right? So I see them making changes that are more towards like now, because I think 2500 was, I mean, anybody could do it and get that mount. It wasn't really difficult. And in PvP, there is a free mount that you get just by playing PvP,
Yeah.
even if you have to hit like a very low threshold and then
And then play a bunch of games.
play a certain number of games, and then you would get them out. And then if you want Glad, you obviously have to push, and then if you want Title, you have to push even higher, right? So I see this system in Mythic Plus kind of following that same trend where it's like, but they moved it, right? Because there's no mount at 2500, is there? Or they
I think it's just an achievement. I could be
It's just a
crazy, but
dint in your transmog or something.
hmm.
Yeah, and then you get the mount at 3K, and then
Yeah.
and then it's just
Yeah.
idle, right? So Mythic Plus is still missing a mount, unfortunately. So maybe there's some opportunities there to get two mounts.
Oh, I think you get
And
one at 2K, and then now it's gonna be a second at 3K, right?
oh, so you do get two mounts.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay, cool. Yeah, so it's basically, I think it's very similar to PvP,
yeah.
and I think the PvP one is fine. It encourages consistent play, and so I think it mimics that a lot. I think there's an achievement every single time you finish all the keys, right? Every time once you hit 12,
Yeah.
you get an
I don't know
achievement,
if
and
it's
then
achievement
13.
or feat the strand though, but there is something. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that that's fine. I do want to say though, I do feel like these changes, I feel like a lot of, I don't want to offend anybody, but I would say kind of semi hardcore players, I'll just say that for Mythic Plus. I think for them, 3K is a big. I mean, look, I consider myself a gamer. I play a lot of characters. I play them very well. I haven't even pushed the 3K. My highest priest is, I think I have four priests right now. Three are like 2800, and I have one that's like 2900. I don't care. I'm not like, oh, I need to get 3K there. Like I don't care. I like to play with my friends, like to do keys. Um I could I get it if I really wanted to, and I pug most of mine. Yes, I have a guild and I can run it, but I like to pug. I don't know why I enjoy pugging. Um and
Masochist.
the experience of pugging. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Uh, but now with these changes, I can see the pathway to 3K being way more achievable for people that aren't maybe as experienced. And I think they'll see that because they're going to be probably getting to 2K and 2500 a lot easier. So I can see them saying, "Oh, this is now achievable for me. I'm going to push." So I think I think we're going to see people actually pushing to the 3K mark to get them out. That second mount, I see that definitely happening, especially with the changes. So I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah, and I do think like this is kind of their way to get like more people into Mythic Plus because if you're a casual player that just logs on and likes going around collecting herbs, sure you can do that. But it's like, oh, but I also mount collect. Let me go push to 2K. You know,
Mm.
so for those people, they kind of are SOL because it's like, well, they probably can't get to 3K and that's fine, but they're just gonna miss out on this mount. However, like you said, should there be something beyond 3K? I do think so, and I think they need to start catering those rewards. Like once you get up to 3K, you're kind of a serious player. Like you're at least putting a lot of time into specifically Mythic Plus. So instead of gearing the rewards to, people like mounts, everyone likes mounts. But if they started giving what's the augment rune that you can permanently use, so
Uh-huh.
you don't have to
Yeah,
yeah, if they
yeah,
gave that to like 3K, once you hit 3K, you just get that, or like once you hit like 3250, you get that. So then it's like you've done enough keys, you've used enough augment runes, you don't have to keep buying and dumping gold once you hit that threshold. Like if they gave player not like player power, but player convenience or like
Yeah.
something keeping you for like a perma feast. Imagine, like you get to
yeah.
3250, then perma feast. Then all guilds would be like, we need at least one person with the perma feast, so something like that, like something that has value outside of cosmetics. I think that would
Yeah.
get people going
Yeah.
too.
Oh, maybe let's hope that now that they have this 3K goal for next season, that is going to make more people play M plus, achieve that, and they'll be like, that actually worked. Let's add more of these,
Yeah.
Oh
And
yeah,
and
for
they'll
sure.
figure out what it is. All right, so let's do something fun for the end here. We're gonna do a tier list based on our expectations and our experience on the PTR so far of the dungeons in Season 2, Mythic Plus of the War Within. And we're gonna use whatever criteria we deem necessary, but for me, I've always had dungeons that I avoid in each season, either because they're too hard or too annoying, or they're like Murazon's Rise, where it's like the worst dungeon ever for me that was ever designed in Mythic Plus, right? So let's try to rank the dungeons based on the
Like
difficulty and how enjoyable
how
they're going to be.
likely we are to avoid them.
Yeah,
Like if I'm
exactly.
gonna avoid this dungeon at all costs, it's in D. But if I'm like, let's jam this all day, it's up in S. Is that what we're going?
Yeah,
Kind of.
is it like the myths and the Arakara that you know this is your weekly key, or is it like City of Threads that yeah I'm playing somebody else's weekly key and my key is dead kind of thing?
Yeah.
Right. All right.
Okay.
So I'll just go through the icons if it's hard to see them. But the first on the list is the Motherlode, and I guess we can go around the table and then we can try to meet somewhere in the middle to rank it in general. Okay.
I'll go first. I haven't
Go
done
ahead.
PTR, but I remember Motherlode. It always there was a couple bosses in there that really the guy with the chain that would shoot up. Nobody would ever go for the grenades. That was always annoying. That was a dungeon, right?
Yep. Yep. The first
Mhm.
boss,
Okay.
like where you had to like kick the balls into it, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
soccer.
yeah.
Yeah.
Kick the balls. Nobody ever kicked the balls. I was a healer kicking the ball, which was so annoying. So I'm not gonna be a fan of that. But that's just my take on that dungeon. Go for
Okay.
it.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned kicking the balls because that's what it feels like being a healer in this dungeon is a kick in the balls.
Yeah.
But no, I'm glad you're laughing, Jay. But that mechanic is so frustrating. So it's awesome. Okay, don't get me wrong. I think it's a cool mechanic, but they need to add like a little icon above each soccer ball. Like this is a healer ball. Healer, go and do this, and then DPS, go and do this one because it is just another healer chore. Like I feel like every pug group I've had to kick all the balls and then I'll miss one and then I get flamed. I'm like, dude, leave me alone. Do your job, you know? But this dungeon is a lot of fun. However, on PTR, it is very frustrating and it's very brutal. Like it's a very tough dungeon. There's some heal checks. There's some like you're having to move up a hill, your tank falls down the hill. Now all of a sudden like they die and you're like, well, this is just like the affix is just the shape of the dungeon. Like it's a very frustrating dungeon, but in my experience, the bosses have also been pretty overtuned.
Yeah.
The boss that shoots the gun like in the circle, that to me like I don't know if it was just the pug groups I was getting, but it felt like we would at least wipe like 4 times before we can take it down, like every single time. So I don't know. I think this dungeon has the makings to be very cool, but it also has like a lot of pain points. So for me personally, it's going to be probably mid to lower, but I'm excited to hear what you have to say, Wolvie.
Okay. Oh, I don't think it's gonna be that bad. The bosses are definitely overtuned. Specifically the second boss with the ads and then the smash. Like I had a lot of trouble healing that. Maybe it was a bad group, although they could manage the last boss just fine. I don't know how that happened. But yeah, I find the trash a bit annoying in some places. There's also like specific, I think there's like poison dispels, so good luck priests, you know, things like that. Also, the last time I played it, that was the end of BFA, and there was this affix, the seasonal affix, which would like allow you to
You
skip
could
parts of
skip
the
and
dungeons.
stuff.
Now you
Yeah.
have to go through all of it, and like there's like mines and things that you have to skip at the end. So that could be really annoying, but I think that this is gonna be one of the better dungeons just comparing to everything else. I have it a little bit higher on my list, but I will admit that I put it there just because I wanted to have something a little bit higher in the list, and I have a lot of
Okay.
things at the bottom.
Oh,
So
so relatively okay.
so yeah, so based on that, I guess we can go for B or maybe A.
Yeah, the thing about this dungeon, this one seems to me like the hardest one to rank because I didn't play back in BFA, but I know that this dungeon back in BFA, I would watch like the MDI
Yeah.
and they would like do the whole dungeon all at the start and then go and do the bosses.
Yeah.
And I think they use the affix to do that. So like we don't know what this dungeon's really going to look like when it hits live. So a lot is kind of up in the air here. Also, the tuning, like we said, is kind of off right now, so it's really hard to know with the tuning. But I think from a mechanic standpoint, this dungeon is like fine. So I don't think it has the best mechanics of this dungeon pool, but it also I don't think it has the worst. You're at least not like in the dark the
Okay.
whole dungeon, if you know what I mean.
So B or A, I guess, is the only question.
I'll let you decide. I
I'll
think those are both fair.
I'll put it into A then.
Okay.
But let me just say this: nothing we say is like set in stone, guys. This is just a guess. This is just a very well
No,
educated guess. It might
this
be.
is your new Bible.
Yeah.
Follow this.
Let me add one
Okay,
more
I'll
thing though for the priests. For you priests, Wolvy's right. There's poison. Just make a macro and remind your DPS and your tanks to kick because that is a kickable poison. So
Yeah.
big
Good
one.
point.
And that always
Yeah,
happens.
make a macro to tell them to kick.
That
Oh,
always
Yeah.
happens.
priest world, you love it. Yeah. All right. What dungeon is this? I can't
This
even
is the
tell.
Mechagon. This is the
Oh,
Mechagon.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Workshop.
Workshop. Yeah. So you guys want to start on this one?
I'll go. I love this dungeon from was it Shadowlands or was it Early Dragon? It was one of the
This
past
is
few tiers.
BFA, I think initially,
BFA.
but then they had it back once already. So
Mhm.
this is gonna be
Yeah.
the
Yep.
third time we see it.
So I love this dungeon when it came back the first time, and I honestly have had a lot of fun pushing it in Mythic Plus. I feel like maybe it's just because I'm a better player or I'm more used to this dungeon, but a lot of the pain points that I had in the past, like the boss that has the rotating fire and the razor blade
The
spinning around, that
cogwheels.
is, yeah, that one to me felt like a lot less busy. You can kind of like just chill on one side of the platform and watch the cogs bounce around, you know? And those things used to just like zip through and nuke me like every pool. So things like that are nicer. I also think this boss or the bosses have like really cool mechanics. The only downside I think to this dungeon is that stupid phase where you have to like hide
In the
from
Steam.
the patrol. Why is that a thing?
Yep.
You know. And then also since we're all healers, Jay, you're not allowed to speak here because you're a priest. But I'm also afraid of this dungeon. Like, is homogenizing the right word? I don't know, but I'm afraid of groups only wanting priests in this dungeon because of they can like mind control the
They fixed
swirl
that.
thing.
You cannot mind control
They
it anymore.
fixed it?
Yep.
Oh, okay. I feel
Latest
like I saw
notes.
people doing it on PTR,
It was
but
there, but in the latest notes, I think they had like one
they got
which
rid of that.
says you cannot mind control the squirrel anymore.
Look, for priest, I'm sorry. Like I know that was really cool and really fun and like it was a cool tech.
Cool.
But for the
Yeah.
rest of us, it's like, ah, man, unless Shadow Priest is really good, people are gonna just like not take us in this dungeon. So I hope they did remove that. Now, if they did, I'm very glad. But other
They
than
did.
that, dude, this dungeon's pretty sick. This dungeon's very fun and enjoyable to heal.
Okay, so how would you rate it?
Oh crap. See, the thing is, like, I don't know how I'd rate it compared to other dungeons, but for me, it's like at least A. It's like I think it's personally above Motherlode.
Okay.
But that's just me.
Do you have a opinion, Jay?
When I played it, it wasn't my favorite dungeon. I hated the last boss. Oh, somebody always
Oh, I
messed
love
up like
Yeah.
the magnet or like getting knocked off the platform. Somebody always messed up. It was super frustrating for me to get that far, and then people just keep dying and dying and dying. So I don't have fond memories of that dungeon on when it first came out as a mega dungeon, and then as it got re-released as Mythic Plus. So I'm not looking forward to that one. That one's gonna rank low for me personally. I don't have fond memories of that one.
Okay. Well,
All
I'll
right,
just
you're
Even
the
as a
deciding
priest.
vote, Wolvie.
well, I'll add to you. Basically said most of the things they changed. For example, the first boss is different now. I
Yeah, way
wouldn't.
different.
It's probably better. I don't know. I wouldn't say that, but yeah, the cogwheels boss. I didn't like the RNG there because sometimes I would just get hit and I felt like there was nowhere to run. You know.
Yeah.
Also the Steam part where you hide. Like if I wanted to play Frogger, I would go play Frogger. Like this should not be in Mythic Plus. And
Yeah, for real.
I'm kind of fine with it because I know how it works. But like even yesterday on the PTR, we went into this dungeon, and there was this hunter man. He couldn't make it. Like we were sitting there for 3 minutes, and he kept getting hit, and then he left. So
Yeah.
I mean,
Attaboy.
yeah, I understand that they want to make it a little bit more interesting or whatever, but like it's fun to do it once or twice. Like if you're doing it on heroic and that's the first time you see it and you're experiencing the dungeon as a mega dungeon for the first time, cool. That's interesting, you know. But doing that for like 60 times on 60 runs that you're gonna have over the season, that like no thanks. And then I definitely have in my notes that the last boss was definitely a lot into higher into the levels of difficulty from what I remember. I don't think that's getting better. It's not that good for pugs because you have to like spread, bait the beams, and then they need to know when to pop defensive. So I'm not a fan of this dungeon either. I don't think it's gonna be one of the worst this season, but I also don't think it's gonna be the best. So I just have it in the middle, into the B.
I'm down, honestly.
Okay.
See, personally, I would swap it in Motherlode, but maybe it's just
Or you
I don't
just
know.
bring Motherlode down to B.
Yeah.
That could also be a thing. All right.
We'll see. Let's keep placing and we'll see where things
Let's go
land.
to our favorite Theater of Pain. I can just start straight on this. So this is the only dungeon with 5 bosses this season. The bosses were very hard in the last iteration. Now they've made the first boss even harder. Like they changed it completely. So there's like different casts now, different mechanics. One of the guys, it's a 3 mob boss, right? So one of them just casts a thing that is like dot for 5 people. You can dispel somebody, but then he also does another dot that is not dispellable, right? And there's like frontals and stuff. So I think they made a very good job of making this boss worse, from what I can say. The Lich boss has been completely changed as well. I don't think it's easier because there's now balls that you need to dodge all the time, on top of everything else. Ads that you need to CC. And then you get one of the wings has like, what is it, 3 mini bosses or something, which are very annoying. Then you get to the last boss, which is one of the most annoying bosses out there. They did a little bit better job. Like some of the visuals are better now. So in phase 2, in phase 2, the guys that spawn and fight, and there's like big circles around them, so don't stand in those. But the guys that charge through the arena, the visuals are still not there. So that didn't make it better. And I just remember breaking so many keys on this last boss in particular because it's hard to dodge everything. And that's gonna be exactly the same in this iteration. So I am definitely not looking forward to this dungeon, and it's easily D for me.
Really?
Yes.
I think everything you said, I disagree. I disagree with.
Okay.
So, okay, the first boss, I found it to be easier. If I'm being honest, it depends on which iteration of Theater of Pain. Because if you remember back in like season 1, Theater of Pain's first boss was very hard because the rogue would like TP behind someone, like nuke them or something. Like it would do something that like I just remember
this
was
is
so
gone.
frustrating. They had removed that at some point. Like they nerfed that guy or did something with that guy. That boss was very manageable. Like whatever season it came back or the end of Shadowlands. But now it's, to be honest, unless you're letting all the casts go off, it's really not that bad. The AoE damage is like very bursty from what I saw, but for the most part, like a lot of the damage is like preventable, avoidable. Not like not a majority of it, but like a good enough of it to make it like safe to heal, you know? Now I will say the one pain point with the boss is the crippling spores, the swirlies that one boss casts, you have to continuously dodge, 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 dodge. It's very frustrating because the first one comes out really quickly. Like swirly spawns, boom. If you don't move, you're dead. You know, it's kind of like you have to be moving as soon as that cast is going off. So that is frustrating. But other than that, I think the boss, at least in my experience, was a lot better than it has been in the past. Um, Outside of that, like yeah, the dungeon has like some frustrating points, like the mini bosses and stuff. It does test your DPS. Can you do big single target as well as you still need to be able to do enough AOE to heal to deal with the dungeon? But I don't think that's too much of an issue. The mini bosses and stuff, but the big change in this dungeon was the third. I say the third boss, but the caster boss with the orbs and stuff.
Yeah.
I personally, I love this version of the boss. Yeah, as a melee healer, I do have to, basically as anyone, you have to kind of constantly be dodging orbs, which is a little annoying. But with the ads, like all the changes make the fight more engaging and more fun, and less of just like, hey, here's this one person that has like chased their ghost or something. What was it like in the past? It was just, I hated the boss in the past, but I don't know. I'm a fan. And the final boss, yeah, like you said, you don't see the chargers, but you can still do the tank in the corner strat, and it's really not like it's a non-issue unless the portal spawns in that corner, you
Yeah.
know, and then it's pretty frustrating. But for me personally, this is a great dungeon. I don't think D tier. I don't know. I'll
Okay.
let you guys place it, but
Let me just
I'm
add something else. I think right now the bosses on the PTR have a lot more health than they're supposed to. I'm not
yeah.
sure if I'm just, making this up on top of my head. But and that's probably the reason why I didn't like the dungeon, because there's 5 bosses in there, so all you fight is basically bosses. But yeah, I mean, it from like all the D dungeons that I have, this is the one that's the
Oh
least
God, you have
supposed to be
multiple
there. Yeah.
D. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Oh
Um,
man.
so yeah, I mean, I'm fine to putting this a little bit higher as well. It was not that was definitely one of the dungeons that I used to avoid back in Shadowlands. But for example, Sanguine Depths was something that I hated even more. So that was not the worst back then. So I'm willing to give it some slack a little bit.
My memory of this, and I obviously haven't experienced the changes, but going back to when it was live, uh, it always felt like, because I pug like you guys, and it always felt like people would only get to a certain point, and then they didn't have experience, so they would inevitably mess up on the next boss, and then you'd break the key, and and that would happen all the way to the last boss, to where yeah, they were getting hit by charges, people were getting dead, like it that was that to me. When you had a group that knew how to do it, was fun. It's a fun. It went smooth, and it was cool because you got to see a lot of and do a lot of stuff. But when you had learning run, it's such a long
And
dungeon if
painful.
it's not being done right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm not. I look forward to the challenge of it. It's not my favorite. I think in coordinated groups, it's probably going to be very fun. Did they still have PvP in there?
Yeah.
Is it still
Yeah.
in there?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I'm gonna love that part of it even when I'm on my warlock. But outside of that, in pug groups, I'm just hoping that people come prepared. And my experience has been it can be pretty miserable. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I will say like one pain point in this dungeon is that I thought they would remove if they ever brought it back was the whole like you kill this guy, you pick up the orb, you put it in the thing, then it turns on the portal
Yeah.
depending on which way you go. It is cool having a choice of which way to go, but it just it's so lame. It I don't know, it's very lame. I kind of wish they'd remove that and just make the portals like it's already decided where you're gonna go, so you can plan your routes better and stuff.
Mhm. Yep.
But
Even
I
like,
don't,
okay, some portals have extra trash that you can pull from the sides, but that's not usually what happens in parks, and they're
yeah,
kind of like limiting. It's the same with the mini bosses. Yeah, you can skip the mini bosses, but you need to be prepared. You need to plan the route, so that's not easy to do in parks. So I think it looks like a fun dungeon because it gives you like this sense of freedom. There's different wings and you can do things differently. But if you're pugging, it's just a W dungeon and you have to deal with all the crap inside, and you don't have that much of a choice, and not everything is that pleasant. But yeah, I think maybe my sentiment is way too harsh. So as I said, I think the community perceives that a little bit better than I do, so we can just put it a little bit higher. The question is how much higher?
personally, I would have put it below workshop still, so probably still like in low B, like
Low B
below.
or C?
I mean, I'll let you put it in C, but I feel like you've had a tough go at Theater of Pain, and maybe like a session of therapy with Chris would help you out. But
Okay.
no,
It's
maybe
so funny.
All right. I'll
it's up
I'll
to you.
I'll make a compromise here. Let's put it into low B. And hope that you're right.
Yeah.
Okay. The new dungeon is next. Operation Floodgate. That has been on the PTR a lot now, so I think we played it quite a bit, and we have a pretty good sense about it. It was also overtuned. They also made some changes to some of the annoying trash in there. So now I think it was one of the dungeons that seemed better tuned in the beginning. Now it's even better.
Oh yeah,
And there are a lot of things there, like you still have to like move constantly from like frontals, swirlies, dodges, soul blades, and
got
like
the blades.
sparks chasing you, whatever. But there are some annoying parts there, but I think I would personally enjoy this dungeon. And if it's not completely overtuned, that might be like the dungeon, the go-to dungeon to do in next season, because once you learn the mechanics and you know what to avoid and how to do the bosses, it's not that scary. So that might be like the new mist or something which people go to for their weekly keys.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it might be tuned. They're gonna tune it up because, like, I'm sure bubbles or whatever at the end of the dungeon's gonna hurt a lot in high keys. Those two like mechas before the final
Yeah,
boss are gonna be like a big wall that a lot of groups probably can't get past. It's kind of like in Mist, it's like the two Furious Thrashers in a way.
yeah,
Um, but outside of that, like I think the boss mechanics are very enjoyable. I think the one boss that's gonna be like the most annoying, well, the two are the first and the last. So the last boss is gonna kill your tanks a lot if you're not careful, especially as a healer, you need to help your tanks out, and that's a pain point. And then there's also like added frustration of like, do you remember Chromie back in
Mhm.
the time
Dragonflame?
dungeon where you had your like
Mhm.
clone and you had to have your clone chase you into a portal? There's that mechanic back, which is kind of annoying, but like that boss is just lethal to the tank if I'm being real. There is some like healing checks, but you have to like be on the move during them, so it's very
yeah.
frustrating. But outside of that, like it's really not that bad. But the first boss can get you stumped. Maybe it's just because I'm a melee healer and I couldn't. There's like one mob that'll start this cast and it'll just channel damage until it's kicked. And I would have to like every time I ran this dungeon in Pugs, I would have to roll in there, kick it, roll out, and cross my fingers and pray. But that I think all the bosses, like the bowling boss, the one that you have to bowl through all the bombs, that one's really cool. And then mud, what's his face, like mud
Swamp
face or something
face,
like that.
swamp
Yeah,
face. Yeah,
super cool boss.
Yeah.
However, I could see it being so frustrating. I kind of every time I would get in this dungeon, I would tell everyone move left, dodge left, every mechanic move left, and then you'd have this one guy that would go right, and then you'd be pulled to the center and die. Like it's a fun boss, but oh, it is frustrating to pug because you are very
I don't know
reliant.
if I uploaded the video of this, but that's exactly what happened to me last time. So we're going left, guys. We're going left. So the thing spawns. You're basically the bosses. You're connected to somebody in your group, and he does a frontal. So you have to run. But if you run in opposite directions, one of you basically gets yoinked to the other,
You get
right?
like snapped to the
Yeah,
center. Yeah,
so the boss casts the front, so we're all running left, and there's just one guy shoo, to the right, and he was connected to me, and he yonked me into the fronto, and yeah.
yeah,
But I think like there's a lot of frustrations in the new dungeons because we're learning them. Once we kind of like settle down a little
exactly.
bit, I don't think that should be that much of a problem. And from that perspective, I actually had this as S.
I would put it in S as well. I think it's a
Okay,
very good
so
dungeon.
it has the potential to be a banger dungeon. And I couldn't find a better picture for it, but we know that's the Operation Floodgate.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to the dungeons that we've seen already, even before the PTR. The first one is the Priory of the Sacred Flame. So, opinions on this one?
I'll be
Let me take a hot take real quick.
yeah.
It's gotta help my wife.
You're good.
I love that dungeon. I love kind of the beginning kind of choice selection. The thing I'm terrified of is two parts in that dungeon that I'm actually petrified of. Number one is the boss that drops the ground, or maybe it's mobs. I think it's mobs that drop that glowy ground
Yeah, Hindered that.
AoE thing. Man,
Yeah,
that
it's
thing
not
was
that
so
bad.
They nerfed it, yeah.
okay.
This is it's a
Oh,
pretty good
good.
level.
Okay. And then it's the mini boss in the big open foyer where that's in the middle that has the aura that does ticking damage. That was the other one that was just like, oh, I'm not looking forward to that. So hopefully they nerf that one too.
Well,
Other than that, I like that dungeon. I love the
luckily, I
dungeon.
don't even know which one you're talking about, so I think they
Are you
might have
serious?
nerfed it. Yeah.
There's a so after you kill the area where there's the ground stuff I was just complaining about, you go up the steps and then there's that huge room and there's
Oh,
mobs on either
I thought we were
side.
downstairs. My bad.
No, you
Yeah.
go up and then you go up the steps and then at the top of the steps there's like a front pack and then there's some packs on the side. There's a second caster with two other mobs in the middle. I don't know his name, but the guy in the middle has an aura. And
Just like,
as long as he's alive, it just keeps taking damage and it's mega. And if people don't kill it, it's very painful.
yeah, I
Okay.
mean, I think this dungeon, like a lot of the pain points have been dealt with in my experience. Like I think the trash is pretty scary. Like there is a lot of damage that can come out, especially like the mini boss on the right, like the fire one that
Yeah.
spawns all those
Mhm.
puddles and stuff. It's pretty lethal, but it's not like it's not turbo lethal. It's not like you walk in this dungeon, you're like, oh, here we go, it's City of Threads again. You know, it's one of those where it's like, oh, this is a fun one to heal. At least
Mhm.
it is in my experience, and I like the variability. Like the first boss, you can kind of decide how hard you want to make it,
Yeah.
and that to me is pretty fun, and it can
Yeah.
pose a challenge at lower keys, and then in later keys you can kind of avoid that altogether if you want. Um, but yeah, my biggest worry when I heard this was being announced, or like when I knew that this was going to be in the season, was the consecrations. I was like, that was the biggest pain point in
Mhm.
the initial version of it. But yeah, those have been completely. They're tiny. They're literally the size of a paladin's
So
consecration. You
good.
can just dodge them.
So good.
Yeah. And they don't do
Um,
that much
So
damage
good.
anymore, I
yeah,
think. But yeah.
you
I'll be
can
right back.
go
You guys keep
go
going.
do your thing. Um, but outside of that, like the I just don't see anything wrong with this dungeon. I mean, like I'm sure with more testing there's going to be things that kind of annoy me, but what is it? I'm sure you don't like it. Let me guess.
I'm somewhere in the middle. Like the problem is I couldn't even test it in the previous week when it was available because the thing didn't work. Like you couldn't set your keystones to be in the Priory. And when I did it the first week, it was actually very hard. Like I think the first boss was bugged because even if you killed all the lieutenants, it
It
would
was
still
still
remain one of the
wreck your
buffs.
tank.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would. Yeah,
So that was a problem. We managed to get through it somehow. The second boss felt like a raid boss, man. What the hell was that? Like you have to
yeah. You
stack,
have
then
to
you have
move
to soak, you have to
so
move.
quick.
Yeah. It
Yeah,
was
you need coordination. It's
yeah.
crazy.
I guess I was in one of the lucky groups, and the lucky group in a PTR means that if you wipe, people just don't leave, right? So
Yeah,
we basically progged it. Like we wiped several times on it. We finally managed to kill it, but it felt like a raid boss. Like I don't know if it was the tuning or something, but it felt
I
extremely
went through the
hard.
same exact thing. We
Yeah.
had to like we kept wiping and we were like typing to each other like, okay, don't leave, but like here's what we need to do, and like
Yeah.
let's try it like this
Exactly.
and stuff.
Yeah.
But to me that was fun. Like that was what like a good PTR fight looks like, is like you have to like learn it. And then once you get the movements down and stuff, to me it was like it wasn't it wasn't that tough. Like you'd have the occasional like spinning hammer
Yeah.
death or something, but like it wasn't that bad.
Yeah. Well, hopefully with tuning it's gonna be better. But then we reached the last boss, and that felt completely overtuned as well. Like
Yeah.
we progged that a little bit, and then there's like two phases. You go to the second platform. He does the pulsing AoE. Somehow I managed to heal, and at the same time there's like ads running up, and
Yeah.
these ads like you just start like they look at you and you die. Like the tank didn't even have a chance to get aggro and stuff. So that felt completely overtuned as well, but I'm actually willing to give this dungeon the benefit of the doubt that they're gonna fix all of those and it's gonna feel much better. Unfortunately, as I said, I couldn't even test it the last time it was on because I didn't know how to set my keystones there, and I guess that was the problem for everyone else because there was nothing in the LFG2 for that dungeon. But if they fixed all of that, I think that could be one of the better dungeons.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean I would put this in A.
okay,
However, I'm worried about whenever they make a dungeon such that like a certain spec or a certain role or a certain class is like needed kind of, it worries me because it limits it limits composition. So
yeah,
like as a Mistweaver monk, I kind of hope that either Rep Pally or Prot Pally or Shadow Priest is good this season, at least good enough to bring to a key, because that buff that you get at the start of the dungeon, at least on PTR, is like very
yeah,
strong. Like it does so much. So I hope it's not what. Okay, think of it like this: like back Necrotic Wake, we know what Necrotic Wake is today, but remember what it was back in Shadowlands, where the weapons were the dungeon.
yeah,
Like you just throw a weapon and it nukes like the whole pack, the whole room. I hope that that's not what this is. It's like the buff makes or breaks the dungeon.
yeah.
So
And I
that is a worry.
completely agree, man. When they do things like that, it's like, oh my god, we don't have those things in our dungeon, we're screwed. So I don't think that's fair. I don't think that should be part of M plus at all. Like if something is there, just let everybody use it, you know. But
Yeah.
yeah, whatever. So you're saying A?
Yeah, I'd say A or like high B.
I
Either
had it
one.
into high B as well. And
I'm happy with.
all right,
You
let's
know what? It's not worse than Motherlode. I would put it up there with Motherlode.
okay,
Yeah.
let's put it there. And again, like if the tuning remains like what I've experienced so far, it's easily like C or D for me. But I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt that
Yeah,
it's
I'm
gonna
sure it'll
get
be
better.
toned
Yeah,
down a bit.
yeah. All right. Cinderbrew Meadery is next. Now this one for me has a potential. It was also overtuned, but at least we could test it, right? There were some things that felt completely unfair there. So, for example, there's this big guys that charge the wall and do damage. They do AoE damage. Okay, you have to heal through it. If you die and you spawn at the start of the dungeon, you still take damage from them. So
Yeah.
that was very
On your walk
annoying.
back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I actually did like I don't know what I did, but I was on my enhancement shaman. I was not healing, so I die. I spawn at the beginning, and it was a pool. Like we butt pulled something. Like there was two of these guys.
Yeah.
So by the time I run back, I died. You know, I assume. Actually, I don't know if that's intended or not, but that should definitely not be a thing.
I don't think it should be.
Yeah.
If someone runs into a wall a mile away, I shouldn't take
Yeah,
damage, you know?
it's literally at the other end of the dungeon, guys, and you still die. So,
Yeah.
there were some annoying trash pools there. There were some annoying progs on the last boss with the group. Maybe it was the group. But I think this dungeon actually has a potential. It has interesting mechanic. It has interesting bosses. It did feel overtuned, but it was not overtuned as some of the other places. So I put it into high A for me, because probably it's not gonna be like your go-to dungeon for your weekly keys, but I don't think that's also gonna be a dungeon that we're gonna be avoiding.
Yeah. I mean, I would have personally put this in low S or high A, so I'm happy with high A.
Okay.
Because I think the same thing. I do agree a lot of it is overtuned. Like a lot of the trash especially is a little bit overtuned, but that's like fine. You don't expect everything to be
Yeah.
tuned perfectly on the PTR, but the first room is pure chaos and I'm here for it. Like there are so many mobs, there's so much butt pulling going on. Like it's crazy how much butt pulling happens, but it's still a good time. And as a Mistweaver monk, with our buffs to spinning crane kick, we can just like spin and just like turn our brain off and do like 3 million HPS. It's pretty fun.
You still have to like
Um,
stun and interrupt, unfortunately, but yeah.
no, that's a DPS mechanic. But the first boss is super cool. You're just like you're dealing with all these drunk customers, and like as a healer, we just sit in the middle of the room and heal during that while everyone just like goes and runs brews and stuff. It's a really fun boss. And then I think like I'm all the bosses are really cool and like interesting, and the names of the bosses, the theme of the dungeon, like everything's perfect. But I will say that the biggest pain point that I experienced while pugging on the PTR is those charging guys. And yeah, taking damage across the whole dungeon is rough. Like that sucks. But the biggest pain point was you would get a guy that doesn't know. Okay, the way that these guys work is they'll pick a target, they'll lock on, and then they'll charge until they hit something, and it does big AoE damage. But if you aim them at other mobs, it'll pull everything it walks through. It like social pulls everything. So you would send one through this entire room. You're like, well, here we go, we wipe, and then you just start chain wiping, and like it's so annoying. But if they fixed that, the social pooling, and then if they fixed the big AoE, I think that would make the dungeon just like chef's kiss perfect, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
I like this dungeon though.
So yeah, definitely has potential, but again, you should take a grain of salt with everything you
Oh,
say
yeah.
because it is definitely dependent on tuning, right? This is the
Yeah,
Bible,
100%.
but if Blizzard decides to change the tuning, the Bible changes, guys. It's what it is. Okay. Then we have the Rookery next. So that was the only dungeon. I think it's the only dungeon with only 3 bosses. So I actually had high hopes for this. But as we already talked about a little bit on the podcast, we were very
Already
unpleasantly
mentioned.
surprised on the PTR, right? It was the longest time that I couldn't even see the second boss. You know, all the groups
Oh
would
yeah.
stop before that. Eventually, we got there. I don't know how we killed that thing. It was doing like
It has so much health.
yeah,
Like
it
so
has so
much
much
health.
health. It's doing
That
insane
dot,
amounts of damage. Yeah.
that dot
Yeah, so
hurts.
we finally killed it, and then oh my god, the last boss, guys. I don't know what to, like. I haven't seen enough from it, but from what I saw, one of the bosses that I hated the most, probably in the history of M Plus, is the last boss in Siege of Morales because it has 2 things that you need to dispel, and if you have 2 dispels, because it is possible to have like a warlock or something, it's like kind of like it's not a boss. But then if you
Yeah.
don't, you're struggling. The last boss in the Rookery is kind of like the last boss in Siege of Morales, but on steroids, right? It's doing so many more things. there's still 2 dispels, right? But then there's like AoE and frontals and adds if they spawn, and like you have to kill those crystals. It's like it's insane. Like
very hectic.
I like obviously it was I got there when it was still hopefully overtuned, but and then like I don't know what strat we were doing, but the tank was saying okay we have to split into 2 groups, and then I would just be out of range from the other group, so I couldn't heal them. Like I don't know what was going on there, but honestly after I was done with this dungeon I was like I never want to fight this boss again. So hopefully it's better when it releases, but that was like an easy D for me. Like all the experiences I had in this Rookery, and that's a dungeon that I did a lot on the PTR, none of them were good. And I can talk more about it, but yeah.
I will say, like, early iterations of the PTR, it was easy D for me
Yeah.
because, like you said, you could barely make it to the second boss in like pug groups and stuff, like, if you're lucky. But also there were mobs in the first room. Well, I guess like the first room, the first boss room,
Yeah.
where it used to be like 6 different 5 or 6 mobs, and they just have you seen that meme where that guy's like lightning bolt, lightning bolt, lightning
Yeah.
bolt? It was literally that. And if you stun them, they're like, okay, let's take a break, back to it, and they'd start lightning bolting. And then you had to individually kick them, but they were like 5 or 6, so it's like that was brutal. They did tone that down, and I think there's only like 3 of them now or something,
There's
and
3 or
it's a lot more
4.
manageable.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, it's a lot better,
I don't know
but
if you figured
still.
this out, but there's a trick. They actually have a buff, so if you purge them, they're not spamming the lightning
Oh,
bolts
so
that
yeah,
quickly.
I don't
Yeah.
have purge. I wonder
Yeah.
if Monk's pressure. I didn't know that, but I
I
wonder
went
if the
there on my
pressure point
paladin
works.
first, and like you pull basically, they all start casting. Even if you interrupt 1 or 2 of them,
They
if
cast until you're
yeah,
dead.
no,
Like,
if 2 of them target you, bam, insta that. Like I don't know
yeah,
what key level it was. I was doing it on, but like I went into my paladin, insta that. I run back, they target me, insta that, and I was like, what the hell is going on?
yeah.
Then I noticed they actually have a buff which increases their haste with like it's a good amount of percentage. Like I don't know how much it is. Then I went on my shaman. It's still annoying, but if you purge them, at least they're not spamming like a machine gun. It's just
Oh, that's cool.
they're just spamming. They're still spamming, but it's not a machine gun.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that this dungeon is the final boss. I saw it I ran like so many rookeries. Like it was my default key to practice each healer, and I barely saw the last boss.
Yep.
I'll be totally honest. And when I did, it was like this is brutal, and like my group gave up after 1 pool. But it's kind of like Stone Vault, the Coagulum boss, mixed with like the first boss is like it has so many mechanics going on.
Yeah.
It's disgusting, but
It's
I
another raid boss.
yeah, but they have removed a lot of the pain points. They've removed some of the casters at the beginning, which made it really annoying. Like I said earlier, it used to be so miserable being a Mistweaver in this
Yeah.
dungeon because there were
Not only
swirlies or
Mistweaver,
like
man. It was
yeah,
miserable for
I'm sure,
everyone.
yeah. But there were like puddles all over the place downstairs. Now they've gotten rid of that. Yeah, the mini bosses will suck you in that you can't be next to them, so you can't punch and kick.
Yeah.
But like still, it's like so much better than where it started off the PTR. So like for me personally, I think this is one of my favorite dungeons. It just comes down to that final boss. So like if we remove the final boss, to me this is an A tier. But if you put that final boss back, it's like a B C tier
Okay.
for me personally.
Yeah. And I guess the last boss could be manageable if it's tuned correctly and it's not insane, but from what we've seen so far, it's beyond insane, right?
Yeah.
All right, so I'm willing to give it a little bit of a benefit of doubt and put it into a C. Do we agree there? Because I definitely had it in D on my list.
I'm happy.
Okay. All right, and
Gotta leave
then
room for Dark Flame at the bottom.
yeah, I would just put this there and we're done, guys. See ya next time.
No,
Yeah, like
no,
my notes are Darkflame Cleft D dash. What the hell is this?
yeah,
This is
it's
my notes.
so obnoxious.
Yeah. So
I don't know about you, but like
sorry,
the whole cart phase where you have the darkness and the candle and everything, it's so stupid.
bro.
But
How did you get to the card face?
I
That's my
I
question.
did low key level. I literally did Dark Flame low key levels, and then I avoided this place like the plague.
Yeah.
So my testing has only gone to a certain level in this dungeon, but I will say like a lot of deaths, a lot of wipes, a lot of everything. Could not tell you what's going on, other than the fact that we made it here. and the bosses are pretty enjoyable. But yeah, the tuning, the rest of the dungeon is god awful. Well, the last boss, I think we wiped. We didn't even finish the dungeon. I think we wiped on the last boss. I was like, okay, I've seen enough of this dungeon. I'm out. You know.
Yeah.
But it's miserable. This dungeon sucks. Like the
I've
only redeeming quality is the boss that spawns that like turns those wax figures into yourself.
candles. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like constant ticking damage, which is really fun to heal. Like I love bosses like that. So that alone is like okay. But the rest of this dungeon, I'm just like, what are we
Yeah, I'm
doing? Why
looking
is this
forward to
even
candle
fun?
management on the last boss and who's gonna pick it up and move
It's the
it and
healer. It's
Yeah.
our job. It's our chore.
No, I'm
What are we
sure the last
doing?
boss is horrible, but I've never managed to see it on the PTR. I've done it like before on like heroic and whatever, but yeah. Even like the second boss, like I had for the longest idea, I had no idea how this thing works. Like we go there, something happens, we all die. You know, it's
Is that
either
the big candle
the big candle, yeah.
that
So
lights up the room?
you either manage to get the whole floor into that thing that he casts and everybody dies, or there's like the circles that drop and you have to be basically pre-moved. Like if you see the circle and then you're, oh, I have to move. No, you're already dead. You have to be moving already at this point, right?
I'll be totally real. I was checked out during that fight. We had a demon hunter tank who was like kind of flaming us, but also kind of like, okay, I know how this works. Like, just do what I say. And he legit like guided every single
Yeah.
move that we made, and we somehow killed the boss. But to me, when we were doing it right, the boss was cool. I couldn't tell you what we were doing, but it looked like we were like
Yeah.
blowing out a candle and then like standing in the darkness, then standing in the light, and like it was a cool fight. But like, man, it was like it took some tries for
Yeah, man.
sure.
I reached that boss probably in like 5 groups. Only one of them managed to kill it. It was like the tank was alive for like the longest time, you know, and
Oh,
he just
really? Like
he just
soloed it?
soloed, yeah. I
Oh
mean,
man.
yeah.
like that place, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just tuning, but even the fact that you're like on the cart and you're just throwing bombs at the boss, like this is not Mythic Plus, man. It's the
That's
same
so
thing.
corny. It's
Yeah,
so, and
like
if you don't do it, like at least in Grim Batal, there's like some gaming that you can do. You can like
yeah,
wait till they stack and then like chunk them down. But like here, it's just like spam
it's
click this
mindless.
button.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so stupid.
And like why is this there? Like I came into this dungeon to play my class, to do the mechanics, you know, to heal, and now I'm stuck in this card. I'm throwing stuff at something, and like why is this there? It's like
You know
fine to
what's
do it
annoying about
once,
that
but
too?
what?
You know that one bothers me because if you're good, you can't game that one. If you're good at it and your whole team is good and hits him right,
Yeah.
it gets to a point where he's so far back you can't do anything anyway. So it's not
Yeah.
like you can, if you optimize it, you can actually lower his health. No,
Yeah.
once he hits a certain threshold, it's like, oh,
And
yeah,
that's
you
the
can't do any
thing.
more damage.
So if you hit, you have to hit the certain threshold, otherwise you have to fight it after that with more health, right? But
Yeah,
if for
yeah.
whatever reason your group is not that good, you're screwed because you can screw it up,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
and it's not
exactly.
even
Yeah.
like I think okay, so if you miss some bombs in Green Bateau, you can still salvage it. Okay, you have to spend a few more seconds on the trash or something. But then
Yeah.
if that boss has like 15% more health, man, you're not killing this thing. Like
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
whatever. Right. So I think that's like the easiest D. And what bothers me even more is that people have been complaining about this place forever. And now
Since it was a
it's
heroic dungeon,
yeah,
like
yeah, and now
all
it's
season.
here, and we're testing it, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better.
We were
But
all saying like, "Oh, they're gonna fix this before it
yeah,
hits live,"
Oh,
and then like they didn't.
oh.
They didn't remove the pain. Like, ugh.
the hopium was big there, but
Yeah, it was.
it was in vain. So let's hope we're very bad prophets. But this is gonna be the easiest like avoidable dungeon this season. Like nobody's gonna play it. But yeah,
Yeah.
let's hope we're
Can you
wrong.
do me a favor?
Go
Can
ahead.
you move Cinderbrew and the other A tier one that's not Priory to S tier for me?
Cinderbrew. You want to
Yeah,
put
and
it
then
into S tier?
that one, yeah.
That's
Just
Motherlode.
put them in S.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
big ol' F in chat. Just big ol' F in
All
chat
right,
for
guys.
Darkflame.
This is the final tier list. This is the Bible. It's big F, and
That's
then
funny.
yeah, we can only hope for the better. All right, let's end it here. We'll definitely have to make another episode talking about healing changes and maybe whatever else gets announced. I think there's still, from what we're hearing, it's gonna be the end of February, and then that means we're gonna get what 2 or 3 more weeks of PTR testing. So hopefully things get better. but we'll just keep you posted for that. Thank you, LB, for joining us for this short
LB,
journey.
thanks.
Yeah, of course.
See you
Thank you guys
again.
for having me. These are a lot of fun, and I'm glad that y'all's. I'm glad that it's doing well because I think y'all are doing some good stuff over here. So I appreciate y'all having me back.
Yeah.
It's always a good time, and I hope to be back in the future.
Oh, definitely, and we'll definitely prompt you when we talk about Mistweaver, because that's definitely
Oh,
a hot topic for next
oh yeah,
season. So
I'm ready.
we would like to hear your opinions for sure in the future.
Perfect.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next episode. Now, bye bye,
Bye,
and
everybody.
take care.
Yep.